Hi, Rod Fleming in the Philippines here, and I hope you're all well today. It's a sunny morning. Don't look like we're going to have rain today, or at least not yet, but you know, this is the rainy season. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the autogynephile widows, right? And this actually applies to quite a range of people who are affected. We'll get into that. Meantime, please remember, we need the money. And so please go onto one of the sites and that I'm going to give you the names for and contribute and give us a little bit of a help to continue producing this information. Now, I want to talk about the widows of autogynephiles, and that is the women who are married or in serious relationships with men who suddenly one day, one shiny day, decide that actually they're women. Now, clearly that is a ridiculous position to take. You can't be a 50-year-old man and suddenly decide that, well, really I'm a woman. That's nonsensical. It's just nonsensical. So we have to have a look at what's going on here. I think if you've watched my stuff, you know that we're talking here about autogynephilia, which is a mental condition. I personally would call it a mental disorder. I don't see that it doesn't qualify on any of the parameters that are needed to define a disorder. Fair enough if the autogynephilia is being kept simply as a personal indulgence that one does, you know, in private and on one's own, and it doesn't change anything about your life, then yeah, okay, that's fine. It's just another masturbatory practice. But when it gets to the point of it requiring you to change your life completely, probably to lose your wife, your home, destroy the lives of many people around you, including your own, that is a disorder. It is a disorder, and there's no way around that one. You cannot say that this is something normal or something that, you know, can simply be ignored. You certainly cannot say that it's something that should be applauded. So, while we will do some other pieces on the young transitioning autogynephiles who actually do have a chance of living reasonably well as women, we're talking here about the elderlies. That's the ones who are basically, if they were over 25 when they transitioned, and most of them would be a bit older than that even, they were fully established, they had fully matured and masculinized as men before they decided that suddenly one fine day that they were women. And the ones we're concerned with here are the ones who were so much like that they actually went out and married women. And this is something that some writers have suggested, including Blanchard, might have to do with validation of the male self, that they're trying to keep the artifact under control by doing very masculine things. So they might, for example, have very masculine careers. They might be really masculine guys. Bruce Jenner, for example, before he suddenly decided he was a woman, was an incredibly masculine man, and a very good-looking one too. This is completely normal. They actually big up the masculinity to try to keep the artifact under control, and then they'll claim that it doesn't work. The trouble is that the only people who claim it doesn't work are the ones who failed. The ones who succeeded just keep their mouths shut. They don't say anything. So we don't actually know how many of those there are. The fact is that in most cultures, there is autogynephilia. It's just that people don't know about it. It's kept quiet. So, let's go to the women and children of those men who decide to do this. You know, a girl, typically these men will marry very young, and they'll marry younger women. So you've got a woman who was maybe 18, 20, married the guy, he was probably a few years older. They have children, they have a career, they've got a house, you know, they've got everything they could possibly want. They've worked together to produce all of this. And then one day he says, well, actually, darling, you know, I'm actually a woman, and you'll have to accept me as a woman. And remember, that will mean that because these men remain sexually active, certainly as long as they haven't had a neovagina or genital reconstruction surgery, they're going to be desirous of sex. And the women themselves, you know, women need sex too. You know, what are they going to do? They're going to be like, no, we're just not going to have sex anymore because, you know, I can't be a lesbian. Well, that is actually what they're being asked to do. They're being asked by these men to become lesbians. Now, we know that that doesn't work. We know that these, you know, once orientation is established, and it certainly is by the age of roughly 25, then you can't just change it like that. And you certainly can't change it at will. You can't just suddenly say, oh, well, okay, fine. I used to like men and now I like women instead, or vice versa. That's not possible. So the logical leap, if you like, that's being asked for of the women by the men is unachievable. You can't do it. It's not possible for someone to do that. And so it becomes a real issue for the women and the children. And if the children are young in particular, this is devastating. It might be that older children, once they're 20 or more, are independent in some way, then it's not quite so much of a shock to the system. But in basic terms, it's still going to completely upend them, and it's going to do them a huge amount of damage. And the person they thought was their dad is suddenly now claiming to be a second mother. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, actually, it is. I mean, you can't do that sort of thing in any other milieu and get away with it. If a man decided to run off to South America and be a bandit and hold up trains full of gold and all the rest of it, people wouldn't say he was what a hero he was. People wouldn't, say, oh, well, how brave he is to go and do that. They would say, what an irresponsible bastard. It was the same if the man decided that he was just going to give up everything and be a gambling addict. Nobody's going to call him brave. Nobody's going to say, wow, look at that guy. He's a hero for what he did. But if, they succumb to the addiction that autogynephilia is, they've allowed it to become addiction. It has become a disorder. They have succumbed. Instead of saying, well, actually, the wife is the hero here, the heroine, rather. The wife is the one we should be supporting and lauding and praising because look at what's happened to her life. If we praise the man, we praise this guy who's indulged his sexual fantasy to the point of claiming that he's a woman, which he isn't. Now, I think that means that the women have to be... the first thing to say is that women have to be supported, and there are a number of sites which will help to support them. I'll also, if you want, you can join my site by my Patreon, which is www.patreon.com/sexology. And there I can discuss with you in detail exactly what you can expect if your man is showing signs that he might actually be autogynephilic. Because it always does have precursors. It flags up its arrival long before the incident. And the things that women should be very, very careful about is if the man is particularly invested in dressing them, that is, buying clothes for them and being there, choosing for them what they'll wear, that's not a good sign. I mean, a lot of women will think, oh, he's being kind and solicitous. But he might actually just be indulging his autogynephilia by proxy. He's dressing you instead of dressing himself. That's not a good sign. You need to figure out why he's doing it. If he is doing it because of autogynephilia, trust me, if it's not controlled, it will get worse. Obviously, if there's some evidence that he has been interfering, shall we say, with any of your clothing or your underwear, or any of your personal products, because remember, not all autogynephiles are visibly transvestic. I mean, all autogynephiles are transvestic, because in their fantasies, they're women. So they have this, sort of, what you could call it, it's got a virtual mode in which the autogynephilia is being enacted without actually showing to the outside world what's doing, because these people can be incredibly secretive, and they know why. I mean, they are not going to be open and honest. Things like clothes, underwear particularly if you have nice underwear, stuff that's basically designed to attract men, and you find that it's been interfered with, or that there are stains on it, or that it's torn in some way, because he might have tried to get it on and ripped it. This sort of thing should be an absolute alarm bell, that there's something wrong, something really wrong, and you need to challenge him. If you find that your sanitary products, for example, or some other feminine items are going missing, or you find used ones in the waste which you didn't use, it's not likely that it's unlikely that he's got a mistress there. It's more likely that he's autogynephilic and he's using them himself. And we can go into, in another episode, we'll go into the details of how men express their autogynephilia. Remember, they're inside their heads, they're always transvestic. Inside their heads, they're always, these gorgeous women, which bears no relationship usually to their physical form. So that's something. Sometimes, as in Jenner's case, the person has been found interfering with his daughter's underwear and clothing. And again, this is an absolute no-no. You really need to take attention when that happens, if that happens. So these things are all really bad warning signs. If he starts going out and when he comes back you smell perfume or something like that, something strange, then don't just assume that he's got himself a mistress. I mean, in many ways, that would actually be a reasonable result. You could deal with it. It's quite possible that he's been out as a woman, prancing around the town in, oversized women's clothes, trying to attract the attention of men, and probably associating with others like himself. This is all bad news. So the next stage, of course, is the one day when the man decides to take the bull by the horns, as it were, and admit to his wife that he is, in fact, a woman. And what do you do when that happens? Now, a lot of people will say many different things about this, and many people will say that your role, your duty as a wife is to support the man. Can I make it quite clear that I think that trying to do so is utter madness? On your hands, you have here a full-blown case of clinical autogynephilia. Now, autogynephilia can be managed, it can be controlled, and it can even be got rid of if you start management techniques early enough. But that means starting them as soon as you're aware. This is for the man. As soon as you're aware that you're having these feelings, you need to get on top of the case and destroy the artifact before she starts to get power. If she gets sufficient power that she takes over the ensemble, that is the body you walk about in, then dislodging her is next to impossible. At that stage, it's almost impossible to get rid of the artifact, and the person is basically lost. So, from the point of view of the wives, it's a disaster. At that point, you will never get your husband back. He's dead. He's gone. He's been killed by a woman you don't know, who's been living inside his head for I don't know how many years. 20, 30, maybe more. And slowly manipulating things towards this end, such that one day he will tell you, I am not actually who I said I was, I'm somebody else altogether. So that tells you right away that these people are the most massive narcissistic liars that you can imagine. That they would treat someone like that and claim to love that person, and yet for decades keep this secret, this fantasy, even if it's only the fantasy in his head of being a woman, because it will destroy him. If he lets it take over, it will destroy him. And if he's not going to let it take over, he needs to get on the case really early. As soon as those feelings start, he needs to start managing them so that they don't actually take over. I mean, let's not, there is a thing going on just now that autogynephilic men who transition are so brave and so wonderful. They're not. They're failures. They're failed men. They failed to fight. They weren't good enough to fight. They let this thing destroy them. And for what? For some sexual satisfaction. That's it. Well, everybody likes sex, but there's a limit. There's a limit. And when it comes to this destruction of other people, no, not good. As far as children are concerned, well, I'm a parent. I can't imagine what it would be like for a young child to suddenly be told, your dad's your mum now. I think that would be extremely hard to deal with, and that child would need a great deal of counselling and psychological support. And I never hear anybody talking about that. I never hear anybody saying, there is this resource and that resource and this site for the children of people who suddenly decide, men who suddenly decide that they're women after I don't know how many years. What does a woman do? If she comes home and she finds her husband dressed up in her underwear, jerking himself off in front of his mobile phone or a magazine or something like that. Female porn, by the way, bad sign. Really a bad sign. I mean, if he's not trans-attracted, and a lot of us are, but if he's just imagining himself as the females, you find that this is not a good sign. So what do you do? What do you do if you're in that position and you come home and there he is, he's dressed up in a set of knickers and scanties and he's got his fishnet stockings on and his face all plastered with makeup and he's busy enjoying a good hand job in front of the mirror? What do you do? And I'll tell you what you do. It is you close the accounts and empty them, as many as you possibly can. You leave the house. You go and stay with your mother or anyone who can protect you, and you call the lawyer. That's what you do. You do not try to support the man in his delusion, because if you do, you're just going to make it worse. You're just going to make it seem all right to do what he's doing. He needs shock therapy. He needs to realise he's lost everything. His wife will never speak to him again. His kids will never speak to him again. He will never see them again. That's what you need to do. Because either you need, that works in two ways. In one way, it protects you from further damage. And there is a slight hope, not great, but a slight hope that that level of shock might knock the sense back into him. And he goes, well, wait a minute, no, I'll get therapy. I'll take the time and I'll learn and I'll go to a therapist who is capable of trying to help men to fight autogynephilia. And remember, most therapists in the West, in the United States particularly, they're what's called affirmation therapists. They will say, oh no, you are really a woman, so let's help you be more of a woman, which is totally destructive of the family, absolutely destructive of the wife, and pays no heed to the benefits of the children. In my view, these therapists are absolutely immoral and completely irresponsible. The thing to do with a married man with wife and kids who comes into your office and says, look, I think I'm a woman, really, is, first of all, you give him the sedatives, then you try and get this nonsense knocked out of him. Because it is nonsense. It is nonsense. It's a fantasy. It's a delusional fantasy. There is no feminine essence as applies to autogynephiles. There isn't one. It's not true. What's happening is that they have a sex drive which is located on the wrong thing. It's located on themselves, but in some way as a woman. That is not something you encourage. So for the women, that's all you can do, is you'll just have to try to protect yourselves and your family as best you can and get the most you can out of it. Hit him with every kind of court order you possibly can find. Make him suffer about this because he has royally betrayed you. It's actually worse than just, having a casual fling with the lassie at the concierge desk, which is bad enough, But these things happen on drunk nights at parties and, men are men. But the man who tells his wife that he's actually a woman has been hiding this for decades. He's been keeping this secret from his most beloved people, his wife and children, for decades. So what do you think he thinks of them? How important do you think they are to him if you can lie to them like that? So there is simply no point in trying to accommodate it or to support it. You need to walk. You need to leave the scene. Go away, and if necessary, or if you can, find another man, find a real lesbian relationship if that makes you feel better. Whatever. You cannot stay with this guy. He doesn't care about you. He only cares about himself and the weird succubus that has occupied his body. And please believe me, at the time when this becomes so bad, so severe a case of autogynephilia, that the man is actually prepared to walk up to his own wife, dressed in women's clothing, and say, I'm really a woman, and you have to call me Jean now, it would be something a little bit more outrageous. Jean is too normal, but never mind. Then you just have to walk. You can't support that. You can't do anything with it. There's no therapy on the planet that will turn autogynephilia back once it has been let out of the bottle in that way by the person who has it. There's no hope. In the early stages, absolutely, yes, you can manage it. You can fight it. You can get yourself on the ball and you can do stuff about it. By the time you get to that stage, you can forget it. So, like I say, wives in that position, you come onto my site and ask me and I will try to help. But it's going to involve, your future is going to involve you being alone or alone with your kids, but not with your husband. You can't do that. There's plenty of cases where women have tried to do this and it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. The poor woman has to, how can a woman, a healthy, heterosexual, normal woman, suddenly at the age of 35 or 40, turn herself into a lesbian and become attracted to this woman who suddenly appeared? And meantime, the husband she married is dead. He's gone. No sign of him. Disappeared. You can't do that to people. That's not reasonable. I'm a supporter of transsexuals, real transsexuals, homosexual transsexuals. But this nonsense from AGPs is completely wrong. It's just wrong. If you know you've got AGP in your teenage years, then the best thing to do is to transition then. Or live without, don't get married, just live without a wife and live a life alone. And I'm sorry if you think that's me being cruel to you. It's too bad. It's better than you being cruel to some poor woman and your children 30 years later. Thank you. That's all I have to say on that one.